Come live my life, bro. Drinking 6 a fucking day. Yeah, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo Fantasy Football Show. I'm Dave Loughran, joined by Nick Lepri. Is it Lepri or Lepri?
It's Lepri. It's Lepri. So you got it right.
The first time. Okay.
Yeah. Also,
Notorious Fantasy. If you're not following him, well, hit him up over on Twitter at Notorious Fantasy, FNTSY. Follow me at Loughy_D, LOUGHY_D. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to have you guys with us. Hit that thumbs up on your way in. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. We're cruising here, man. Almost 5,400 subs, new channel, just churning things out at a nice clip. We'll get to 6K, hopefully 10K before the season starts, all thanks to you. But let me tell you, Nick, there are a ton of big pieces of news going all the way around training camp. We're not here to just talk about that. We're here to talk fantasy implications, right? I'm not trying to give you Ian Rappaport type news and updates, which would likely be wrong anyway, but more so, how does it apply to fantasy football? And I think there are some big ones, really notable ones, especially with more news coming out of Indianapolis today as well.
Yeah, honestly, today has been one of the biggest days in news breaks, especially when it came to the whole Colts situation and just how much worse it has gotten, like you just said, basically.
It is, but I can't do this show without, first of all, some wild stuff happened today. In Carolina, you had a dude that was an undrafted rookie. I think he had to have been a rookie trying to make the team, just light up Keith Kirkwood and take his head off. At least that's what they say. It was kind of far out. He not only did he get kicked out of practice, but they waived him like 20 minutes later. Not fantasy relevant at all, but some crazy shit. And part of me is like, yeah, I get it. Dude's trying to make the team, but maybe save it for the preseason. Did you see the video of that?
Yeah, I did. Honestly, I don't know what, I guess I get what he's doing, right? He's trying to make the team. He's trying to impress, but you just can't do that. It was pretty egregious, to be honest with you, this early on in training camp.
Did you think it looked like a bad hit?
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah. I have to look a little closer. I'm assuming it was, and I just didn't get a good look at it. It's kind of far away, and I was multitasking, but yeah, I mean, not exactly the smartest move in your, right for second day or basically the close of your first week of camp. But the big news in terms of just absolute madness was the New York Giants today. From the sound of it, and there's a really good thread. Who was that thread? It was from Vecchiano or something. I don't know. You can find it. It's a really good thread, just kind of detailing everything that happened. Ralph Vecchiano. Yeah, there's a good thread there. So Corey Clement, former Philadelphia Eagle, gets popped, takes a big hit. And following that, Evan Ingram gets up and tries to retaliate, then gets rocked by Logan Ryan. Then Ralph says, then everybody, and I mean everybody, jumped in. But it sounds from the sound of it, Joe Judge was apoplectic, like making him run 100 yards, then doing push-ups and sent all the coaches away. I'm surprised he hasn't killed somebody yet, but what a wild scene in training camp in New York.
Yeah, apparently I read that the coaches were running at the beginning and they just sent them all away because of what happened. That is just hilarious. It's funny that Daniel Jones was at the bottom of the pile of all this. Like, you're the guy who you want to make that next step up to be the franchise guy, and you're just burying him in a bunch of other men. It doesn't make too much sense to me.
Yeah, he almost suffocated. That's not great. He says, and now practice is mercifully over. Wow, I've never seen Joe Judge that angry. Actually, I'm not sure I've ever seen anyone that angry. So I don't know. There's no real fantasy implications there, Nick, because they're going to get up and then they're going to run it back tomorrow. I don't really take this for anything. You've seen fights in training camp, but this definitely seemed like one of the worst ones you've seen in a while. But I want to jump straight into the Colts offense, right? Because we lose Carson Wentz for 5 to 12 weeks. Now, this is 5 to 12 weeks from the time of the injury or surgery or whatever. So it's possible, lowest end of that injury, he's actually back before the regular season. Granted, that would mean that he hasn't played any preseason games or been involved in training camp, so he probably gets worked into it more slowly. Worst case scenario is he misses like 6 games. And then it all depends on whether or not Jacob Eason or Brent Hundley, or if they pick someone else up, even though they said they wouldn't, depending on how well they're playing. But their beginning season schedule is brutal. And now, to make matters even worse, and this is huge, especially for Jonathan Taylor, and you can dive into that, they lose all-pro guard Quentin Nelson, also out for 5 weeks. That is not good at all to start the season for the Colts.
Yeah, and like you brought up before we were even on here, Eric Fisher, he's also supposed to be out until October. Yep. So this offensive line is taking a humongous hit early on. And Jonathan Taylor's a guy right now going in the first round. Some people would argue that he could have been a top 3 running back in fantasy off the board. Maybe after McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook, when it really starts to open up, then maybe you could go with Jonathan Taylor. But right now, I'm putting a full-on stop, in my opinion, on drafting Jonathan Taylor inside of the first round. In the second round, I'm fine doing it because I understand the risk at that point. But if Carson Wentz misses potentially 5 weeks of the season, which I don't think we'll even know until the season starts, I doubt that anything even comes out about this until then. And then with the injury to the offensive line, this is really going to hurt Jonathan Taylor's potential behind what would have been probably one of the best offensive lines in football. So what do you think about it? Are you going to still be drafting Taylor in the first round, or are you more nervous like myself?
I have some reservations about it. I mean, I went back to 2019 and looked at, how the running backs did in that case when you had Jacoby Brissett. Remember, we had no Andrew Luck. So I think, and by the way, we had Marlon Mack as the RB 23, but he had 1,100 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns in 14 games, which actually, they're not bad numbers. But at the same time, you're dealing with injuries to the offensive line. Marlon Mack also didn't really catch passes at all that year. It was Nyheim Hines. I am with you. I have a very tough time drafting Jonathan Taylor inside the first. But I will say this. I still anticipate the Colts having a quality defense. And if that's the case, they should still be able to have possession of the ball long enough to where they're not playing catch up for the entirety of the game. I mean, PFF, take it for what it's worth, had them as the 7th or 8th best defense in the league last year. Ultimately, though, Jonathan Taylor, if you're drafting or if you're not drafting him in the first, the question is, where do we draft him and who are we putting ahead of him in the first round? Because Taylor was a surefire, 8th, 9th, 10th overall pick. I saw him go as high as 6 or 7 in spots where people didn't like Zeke or Saquon Barkley and didn't want to take a receiver there. So I've seen Jonathan Taylor go as high as 6, probably as low as 10, maybe 11, but I thought that was a stretch when Wentz and Nelson were healthy. So where do you put him now and who jumps into the first round?
Well, I would definitely put him behind all of those big running backs. So a Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, then Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara. So he's probably around the range of a Nick Chubb. So maybe you would want to take him in the back half of the first round, but I would not be as confident in it. If you're trying to be risk averse in fantasy football, which is what you should try to attempt to do, at least in the first round of your draft, and then later get a little bit spicy and take those late round shots. But early on, you want to be safe, and being safe does not involve drafting a running back with a quarterback in Jacob Eason. Jacob Eason is way worse than Jacoby Brissett, at least in my opinion. Jacoby Brissett is pretty solid. So I don't know. I'm not all that confident in the first round. I can understand why you'd want to draft him there. They're right. He's an amazing talent. He's great at catching the ball as well. But if Nyheim Hines gets a little more involved, even if Marlon Mack gets a little more usage, apparently word out of camp is that he's looking really good. So I don't know. I'm just pretty nervous about drafting him in the first round. I think I would take Austin Ekeler, Aaron Jones ahead of him at this point. He's probably around the range of a guy like Nick Chubb.
It honestly makes me wonder, are we going to see a scenario where Nyheim Hines is basically your JD McKissick of last season in PPR leagues? I'm not necessarily saying that's going to be the case, but that Washington offense stalled out frequently, right? No matter who was quarterbacking that team, Alex Smith coming back, it really didn't matter at that point. Not a very good offense. I mean, you had Antonio Gibson, who had some great games, and of course Terry McLaurin, but JD McKissick, especially when Alex Smith was out there, was targeted a ton, and it took away from the upside, from the ceiling of Gibson, who was still solid. But JD McKissick, do you know he finished as the RB 17 last year?
Yeah, I didn't know that. But yeah, that is crazy because Antonio Gibson was just getting tugged out of the games because he is a great receiving running back, but they didn't use him for that as much as they should have probably.
No. And the crazy thing is JD McKissic had 3 total touchdowns and finished as the RB 17. He had 80 receptions for almost 600 receiving yards and 2 scores. And then he had 365 and a score on the ground. Now there were also some injuries to running backs last year. And you could say, yeah, there's no way he should have been above Chris Carson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders, and all of those guys. Mind you, a lot of those guys I mentioned only played a handful or missed a handful of games while McKissic played 16. But my fact still remains true that Nyheim Hines could be somebody that at his current ADP actually should move up in this offense, whereas Jonathan Taylor could move down if he's not going to be featured in the passing game. I don't anticipate Hines being awesome, but as a late round pick now, like a 13th round, I've seen him go as late as the 14th round, but anywhere from 12th to 14th round, depending on your league, you might be looking at someone in Nyheim Hines and being like, well, if they can't generate much in the offense, Frank Reich is somebody that is a good play caller and a good offensive coordinator because, he's the one calling the offense. We all know that. If that's the case, you might actually see Nyheim Hines get a little bit of a boost here in this offense this season.
Yeah, I mean, Frank Reich's not the kind of guy who's just going to roll Jonathan Taylor out there. Even though Jonathan Taylor is an excellent pass-catching running back, he's not going to make him become an Alvin Kamara or something like running back where they see 100-plus targets on the season. It's just not that. And like you're saying, Nyheim Hines going extremely late is pretty much a extreme value at this point. But I think that if Carson Wentz was to be back in time, that could really put a huge damper on that. But obviously, I think my assumption at least is that they are kind of being cautious with these injuries in what they're saying. They're not really saying everything. And I think that once it truly comes out in later August, early September, how long it's going to be, we're going to have a really defined answer to what to do really with Taylor. But right now, again, I'm still on the very cautious standpoint.
I'm with you. And by the way, Nyheim Hines was the RB 18 last year. So, it's not to say that he wasn't at all. It's not to say that he wasn't productive. He's going off the board as the RB 45 right now. So even if you were to take him there, you're still probably getting value on Hines, even if Jonathan Taylor might be involved a little bit more, even if Carson Wentz returns at some point. Like if Wentz does miss if he hits the late window of that and he's out 12 weeks, he might be out 12 weeks, but then what happens what if you have to get back into the offense? You have to reacclimate yourself to the offense. This is a guy I understand he's in Frank Reich's offense. So that's definitely a check in the plus box there. And he's not necessarily an offense that he's completely unfamiliar with because Philadelphia had, a lot of similarities obviously, but if Wentz is out for a significant period of time, maybe like a third of the season or so, you could get some definite good production from Hines. So something to keep an eye on. Now, what about the pass catchers? Because I loved Michael Pittman coming into this year. And I think I'm still willing to take some shots on him, especially if we begin to see his ADP drop. But I don't know if there's anyone else in the passing game that I'm even interested in at all right now, or even was when Wentz was healthy.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. Like, even when Wentz was healthy, I wasn't 100% sure this was going to be like, since he's back with Frank Reich, this is going to be the Eagles of 2017 when he's on that MVP like season. I believe that was the year it was. But I'm not drafting T.Y. Hilton. I think every single person will continue to fall into that trap. It's kind of like A.J. Green, where it's that old wide receiver that everyone knows, everyone loves from back in the day, or back in the day as if it was super long ago, like 2-3 years ago. But I don't think T.Y. Hilton is very draftable. Like you said, Michael Pittman would probably be the only one I'm willing to take a shot on, but that has to be if the ADP keeps dropping, because around the range of Michael Pittman, there are other wide receivers that I really like that I know week one have a starting quarterback that I'm much more comfortable with than a guy like Jacob Eason.
Justin Fields and Trey Lance have both looked apparently very, very good. There are reports coming out of camp for both the Niners and the Bears that these guys look amazing. Now, we might be talking about, why does this matter? Right now, they're backups. Who cares? Well, here's why it matters. Because Kyle Shanahan's saying that Garoppolo is still the guy for week one. And I know a lot of people are refuting that it's possible that he would do that. It is possible because Garoppolo is still a decent enough quarterback to where you're not running out of liability at the position. But in Chicago, it's very hard for me to look at Andy Dalton and not say that he is probably a liability. I get it. They paid him $10 million on a one-year contract, and everyone's going to look like an asshole if this guy never starts a game for the Bears. But you traded up to get Fields. He from every report I've read and watched, looks incredible. And he is your future. So we've seen it all the time. Like Robert Griffin III was another example where he was never supposed to start, and then week one, boom, he's your starter. It happens so often. Carson Wentz being another example of that. Yeah, we'll take a wait and see approach. Boom, he's your starter, because some teams just don't want to wait. They don't have time to wait. If Fields ends up starting, or Lance ends up starting, but we'll start with Fields in week one, or even in week 2 or 3, it's very possible that you're going to grab like a top 6 to 8 QB in his rookie season. And this is not hyperbole. I'm not exaggerating. And you're going to get him as like the QB 16 in your drafts.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of years ago with the Bears, I'm pretty sure they paid Mike Glennon a bunch of money and then played Trubisky after week 1. So, like, it's very possible that that's Nagy as well, that this could easily happen. Justin Fields is a quarterback that I'm extremely interested in, going around quarterback 16, like you said. Now, I think they may take a more timely approach with this, maybe wait a couple of weeks, because I believe their first game is up against the Rams. So I don't think if you're Justin Fields, you're going to want to go up against Aaron Donald your first game, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they want to just throw him out there like the Dolphins did with Tua against the Rams and Aaron Donald, which was pretty scary sight to see. But I think Justin Fields is very good. And if it only takes a couple of games for him to get in from a points per game basis, he could be a top 5 quarterback, especially with the wide receiver in Darnell Mooney, in my opinion, really taking a next step up in this season. And he was really always open last season. And it was just the fact that Mitch Trubisky is fucking awful and Nick Foles as well, and they just couldn't hit him. So I think that with this wide receiver core, we could really see Justin Fields step up.
So are you suggesting that Andy Dalton could be the sacrificial lamb in week 1?
Yeah, that is kind of what I'm suggesting, that maybe he gets mauled by Aaron Donald, and then week 2, you just see them fire up Justin Fields, or maybe they send him out there as a real sacrificial lamb just to get hurt, and then boom, he's fine. Week 2, you see Justin Fields. Right.
Maybe just throwing this out there, maybe Matt Nagy tells his starting offensive line, hey guys, take the night off. You don't need to block. Even if it's for the first quarter, just make sure Dalton's injured enough. We don't need a Joe Theismann or an Alex Smith injury, but we need him limping off the field, and then Fields comes in, and then it's a win. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen. Now, obviously, I'm joking, but it does feel like. And here's one thing that is actually, here's a piece of advice that I would give to you guys out there, and I could be wrong. I'm wrong plenty. I see Trey Lance being drafted as the QB 14. And Fields is the QB 16 in most spots, which they're not that far apart, right? Lance is like 121. Fields is 136. I like Fields more than Lance. And it's not because I don't think Lance is going to be really good. North Dakota State, who knows what to expect from him there. He was phenomenal for sure, but only played 1 game in his last season. And it's not exactly, a school playing against the highest tier of competition. But for me, I just think that Garoppolo is better and has a better track record than Andy Dalton. And outside of Andy Dalton's contract, it feels like Fields has the easier path to getting into a starting spot before Trey Lance. And if I'm wrong, Nick, we could know this sooner than later. And I eat my words. But I'm looking at Garoppolo and I'm looking at Dalton, and I'm thinking Garoppolo's been with this team a while. They did go to the Super Bowl with him, albeit a losing year, and he wasn't amazing, but he's not bad. I wouldn't be surprised if Lance has worked in a little bit slower, and maybe Fields is thrown into the fire a bit quicker. What about you?
Yeah, I honestly agree with that as well. I think that Garoppolo is fine enough to start a couple of games. I think if Trey Lance does end up playing, that we see him more of like a Jalen Hurts that we saw last season, with a lot of that rushing upside is what gave him a lot of his points. Whereas I think Justin Fields is more of a pocket passer now. He can use his legs as well. He's perfectly fine running the ball. But I do believe that Justin Fields getting drafted behind Trey Lance is pretty dumb, because Justin Fields probably will start by at least week 4, whereas Trey Lance could be on the bench the whole season, and it really wouldn't surprise me.
I'm looking forward to being right. I hope I am, because I have a lot of Fields in best ball leagues I have a lot of Fields in best ball leagues. And if that pays off, it's going to be huge. I don't think, and you guys in chat, let me know what you would say. How many games do you think Fields starts this season? Because if I had to set an over-under on this, Nick, right? Over-under on games that Fields starts this season, it's a really tough answer, but I'd probably put it at like 13.5. They play the Rams in week 1, you said, right?
Yeah,
What's their week 2 schedule? Let's see.
I'm looking it up for you.
They got the Rams, then they got the Bengals. Ah, man, Andy Dalton might pull out a win. Then they're in Cleveland against the Browns. I'd set it at like 14.5 for Fields, 14.5. What about you?
Yeah, that makes sense. They could honestly start him with the free win up against the Detroit Lions to get him to feel it out a little bit, because the Lions are just an awful team. So that could be just a good jump start, a good jolt to his NFL career. I think that, yeah, he'll probably end up playing at least more than half of the games on the season. I would be shocked if he didn't play at least 8 or 10 games this season. 13.5, maybe, I think that's what you said, maybe a little high, but it seems like that could easily happen.
I'm just curious to see what the pushback from the fan base looks like. And I'm not saying the coaches, all of their decisions are derived from that. But if the Bears come out in week 1, I'm telling you right now, the Bears come out in week 1 and get their doors blown off against the Rams, you're going to hear a lot of cries for Justin Fields to get in there. That's just the way these fan bases are. Will it make a difference? Maybe not. But if they come in and, drop game 2 against the Bengals, or go 1-2 to start the season, or 1-3 to start the season, which seems unlikely going up against a bad Lions team, I think you could see Fields sooner than later. But the problem is they've got the Raiders, the Lions, the Bengals. Then it starts to get difficult for sure. Packers, Bucks, 49ers, Steelers, Ravens. Dude, that's a tough stretch of games right there. So I don't know. Yeah. I think we get a lot of Fields. I also think that the news gets super overblown when it comes to rookies, but I also think in that same breath that we really overhype rookies as well. It's just like every rookie coming into the league is going to be spectacular. Let's draft them at their absolute ceiling. Generally speaking, that happens for running backs, and we can talk about one of these in a second. But Trevor Lawrence has reportedly struggled mightily at training camp so far. Does that move the needle at all for you? Or do you look at this like, all right, he's a rookie quarterback. He's still probably going to be pretty good, and his ADP seems about right for where he's being drafted?
Yeah, it's going to be fine, I would assume. I mean, there are reports that Gardner Minshew is playing really well, but I don't think that should really impact at all Trevor Lawrence's usage this season. I think he starts week 1, and unless there's some type of an injury or even if he plays terrible, I think they just keep rolling him out there. He's a guy that I could see with top 12 potential in fantasy. They have a very bad defense. Their wide receiver core is pretty solid with Laviska Shenault. They have DJ Chark. They now have Marvin Jones as well. So I think this is a team that could be down a lot late in games trying to fight their way back in, and Trevor Lawrence throws a bunch of touchdowns late in the game, like a Blake Bortles-esque Jacksonville Jaguars team from all that many years ago before they were the Saxonville Jaguars. So I really like Trevor Lawrence, and if Gardner Minshew was to start, I think it would be a little bit crazy, even though I like Minshew.
I can't imagine there's any way Gardner Minshew starts. I just can't see that happening. I know he said something like, I haven't shit in a week because... What did you see that statement?
Yeah, he said, I haven't shit in a week because I'm not number 2 or something like that.
Yeah, because I can't accept a number 2 or something like that. Well, I mean, start shitting, pal, because I don't know what to tell you. You're wasting your time. You're going to get impacted bowels all for nothing. But I can say this much, that Trevor Lawrence is going ahead of Justin Fields right now. Okay. If you come to you get to this spot, and you're drafting, and say you're in a league that's deep enough, maybe 18 rounds, and you have a deep enough bench and you can draft a second quarterback, but you don't even have a first one yet. Are you going Trevor Lawrence at QB 15 with an ADP of 1? What's the at? See, it depends on what site, by the way, you're playing on. Some of these sites are going to have his ADP a whole lot different. As an ADP of 125, or would you go with Fields at 136 and just hope for that massive ceiling?
I'd probably take Lawrence, if I'm being honest with you. I think Lawrence is going to play the whole season. Like I said, there is a chance that Fields sits out the whole season. I highly doubt it, but there's definitely a chance in that. So I'm trying to be a little bit safer. I would take Trevor Lawrence, and I do believe that Trevor Lawrence has a lot of rushing upside as well, which is something not too many people are talking about. At Clemson, he was able to get a little bit loose. Yep. Now he's not going to be like Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, where he puts these guys in a spin cycle or something, but he is still pretty good at rushing the ball. So I would take Lawrence, but I would understand your argument for Fields because he's on a much better team. And if he was to start, then he could really be a top 10 guy week in, week out.
For me too, it's like, can I draft Fields and then just go with Ryan Fitzpatrick as one of my last picks? It's not the craziest idea. I mean, that offense is going to be better this year than they were last year. So I think there are ways to mitigate the risk. Worst case scenario, I have a gunslinger in Ryan Fitzpatrick who can still win me some weeks. People tend to ignore that. Go back and look at Ryan Fitzpatrick's fantasy rankings as a starter, like where he finishes at his position. It's pretty good, man. Like it's really not bad at all. I know he's getting old, but if worst case scenario is like, all right, I got to play Ryan Fitzpatrick and then stream some guys once in a while, I have no problem doing that. Best case scenario, I get Justin Fields as my QB 16 and he's starting after week 4 or week 3. I'm very happy about that. So there's ways to get around it. That's probably one way I would do it. Travis Etienne, by the way, same team as Trevor Lawrence. And he was out there, riding for his boy too, giving him some encouragement. But I'm seeing reports that Etienne is uncoverable in camp. But are you okay with right now? I've seen Etienne going as high as I did a mock draft yesterday. He went 45th overall. I've seen him I'm seeing him go in the mid to late 5th round. And I have some reservations about that. Where are you at on somebody like Etienne?
Yeah, I think you're completely off if you're taking him in the 4th or the 5th round. I've seen him go as high as the 4th round in some of these mock drafts because he's a fun name, right? He's a rookie. He's been reunited with Trevor Lawrence.
Rookie running backs, man. People love him.
It's cool and all, but unless James Robinson fucking falls in the shower tomorrow or something, he's still going to be very involved on the team. So I don't really see a way that Travis Etienne really gets a huge role in this offense this season. Now, I could be wrong, but it's pretty hard for these linebackers to cover these running backs that are really good at catching the ball. Like, you don't see Alvin Kamara getting covered by anyone. He's unstoppable as well. So I think Travis Etienne is a guy that I'd be fine drafting in like 1 out of 10 leagues, but I think his upside is very heavily limited by James Robinson, in my opinion. I still think James Robinson has some value in fantasy.
I do too. And Urban Meyer keeps talking about how Robinson and Carlos Hyde are his downfield backs and Travis Etienne is his Percy Harvin. What does that mean, dude? I get what he's saying, but really, what does it mean? So what would you say the percentage chance is that Travis Etienne ends up being the 3 down back in Jacksonville early on? I would say 0.
Yeah, it's very low, especially early on in the season. Like, unless James Robinson goes out there and looks like terrible. I mean, last season, this guy's an undrafted free agent, comes out of nowhere and is dropping he was like a top 10 fantasy running back last season, maybe even top 5 at the end of the year. I don't even know why they drafted Travis Etienne, if I'm being honest with you, because of how cheap it is to have James Robinson. But I think that there's a very low chance that unless something happens to Robinson or Carlos Hyde, that he can really elevate himself to be in a 3-down role, or even a type of role where you want to be starting him. He's like a fine flex option, but if he's a running back too, I would be very nervous to have that on my team.
Hit that thumbs up if you guys haven't done so yet. Subscribe to the channel. Help us get to 6K, up to 10K. Really, that's what we're looking for by the start of the NFL season. That would be fantastic, and I'd be pretty stoked about that. So I don't disagree with you. I want to believe that Travis Etienne is going to be great. But at this point, I want to believe that he's going to be great after year 1 because my heels are so dug in against him being that guy in year 1. And honestly, I watched the guy's video yesterday. I do some reconnaissance missions from time to time. Nick, I'm sure you do the same. We're running a business here. And I saw one dude. What, Jordan? You all right? Jordan Klein producing the show. And I see somebody talking about, I think it was Fantasy Football Flock. Is that wrong? Is that not his name?
No, that's who he is. That's a
Flock Fantasy.
I know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah. So he said that Etienne, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he was saying like at his ADP, he's a steal. And that he could have him. I think he has him as like RB 18 or something like that. So I guess the question to me for everybody, and I'm not talking shit on the guy, but it's a good topic of discussion because you and I don't share. Like, there are people that share different opinions than you and me about Etienne. Obviously, look at his ADP, right? And I noticed he was one of them. The guy gets a lot of views, right? Like a lot of people watch his videos more than ours. Ours are better by a lot, but a lot of people watch his. And
because we're not wearing suits like he does. That's why.
He does wear a suit, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing for me is like, if that is the case and you've got him say RB 18 or 19, that means you're drafting him in the same neighborhood as Carson, David Montgomery, Miles Sanders. He's the RB 22 right now. And I can see why you would want him ahead of some of these guys, right? Because there's a lot of question marks and uncertainty around them. But really, how many of these guys would you be willing to draft Etienne over? Like Mike Davis, Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders, David Montgomery, Chris Carson, Dobbins, Swift, any of those guys
I want all of them over Etienne.
Right.
Jacobs
that's what I would think as well. What about Javonte Williams?
Okay, this is a guy that maybe I'll rant here. I can't stand Javonte Williams. I hate that the Dolphins got sniped on picking him because the Denver Broncos called ahead and traded up to get him. But I think that he is in a situation that is even worse than Etienne because Melvin Gordon is on the final year of his contract. And I genuinely believe they're going to run Melvin Gordon directly into the dirt. And then you see Javonte Williams be very good next season. But I'm not about drafting Javonte Williams in redraft at all, anywhere near where he's going. I think one of the best rookie running backs this year, besides Najee Harris, is probably going to be Michael Carter, and you can get him like 4 or 5 rounds later. And there's no real competition there, in my opinion.
I'm hearing that Melvin Gordon's the number 1 right now. So
it would make sense.
It would make sense. But that's another example of just, looking at rookie running backs and straight overhyping them. Just like straight overhyping them because we assume that they're going to be the guy immediately. Could Michael Carter be the guy immediately? He definitely could be, but I'm trying to be careful about where I draft him. At least with Michael Carter, you're not drafting him in the top 5 rounds, but you're paying like an 8th round ADP for him. You're going to be drafting him around the likes of James Robinson and Raheem Mostert and guys like that. But those are spots that I think you have to be careful about, man. You have to be careful about where these guys are going. Gucci speaks that football flag is more dynasty influence and he's definitely steal at his ADP, especially if I'm going wide receiver heavy. Well, no, he has a dynasty channel and he's got a fantasy football channel. I'm pretty certain about that.
Yeah, he does. He has too.
Yeah. Again, I'm not saying anything bad. I'm saying I disagree with it. That's good. That's what fantasy football is about. That's why we do this. I don't know. So he says he's definitely a steal at his ADP, especially if I'm going wide receiver heavy. Well, going wide receiver heavy doesn't make somebody a steal just because you get him there. You could go. I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, oh, I want to do this and have a good running back. But if I'm going wide receiver heavy and Etienne is my RB1, I'm miserable.
Yeah, like I completely agree. I'm looking to get a safe running back in that range, not someone who might not even be the starter for a majority of the season, at least the beginning of the season, like we were talking about earlier.
Give me Chris Carson there all day. I know Chris Carson isn't flashy and people like flash, right? I'm all about the upside and the ceiling. I get that, but Carson's going to be like a 15 carry per game player, assuming he's healthy. And he's also a 3-down back. I don't think he gets enough credit for that either. You're talking about, look at the running backs on the Seattle Seahawks depth chart. It's not very good. And when that's the case, and Carson's healthy, I have zero reason to believe that he's not going to be the guy there. Rashad Penny could be a great late round steal, but has he been healthy at all? No, absolutely not. He's essentially been a first round bust and a surprise pick in the first round to begin with. We had DJ Dallas and Travis Homer. Carson, you don't have to love Carson, Nick, and we haven't really talked about him. I don't love Carson either, but I did a mock draft the other day and I purposely drafted at the 11th. And I said, I'm going to go wide receiver and see what I can get here, see what happens. And I think I ended up going Carson as my first running back in the early 4th. And at least with Carson, he's going to be on a good offense with a lot of red zone equity. And you know what you get from him. Maybe we all disagree on this, but if Etienne, who doesn't have a defined role in the offense, is my RB1, I don't feel very good. That's all.
Yeah. And Pete Carroll continues to speak about how he wants to run the ball. At the end of last season, started talking about it. And even now they're asking him questions. He wants to run the ball. It doesn't make too much sense when you have Russell Wilson, Tyler Lockett, and DK Metcalf that he wants to run the ball so much, but he just continues to run that way. So I don't know. I do like Chris Carson a lot. And if you take Etienne over Chris Carson, you need to give your head a real shake there, in my opinion.
I don't disagree. You know what else is interesting to me, though, is Jameis Winston has looked really good in camp. And I get maybe some people are like, why are we talking about Winston? Well, here's why. Number one, if Winston is good, it's going to make Alvin Kamara better. Of course, the offense is going to be better, more trips to the red zone. Let's not forget Alvin Kamara, red zone wise last season, was out of control, right? He had 16 touchdowns on the ground, 5 through the air, 21 total scores. He's yet to have a 1,000-yard rushing season, and he was the RB1, 756 receiving yards on 83 receptions. Granted, a lot of that was Drew Brees dumping it off to him because his arm was a noodle, but Taysom Hill targeted him very infrequently in those games that he was starting. Jameis Winston being good, and it sounds like he has been, could make this team really interesting, not just for Kamara, but also what about all of these receivers that we don't really know what's going on with Traquan Smith, Deontay Harris, Troutman, and all of them? Is it possible that with Michael Thomas sidelined potentially through the week 6 bye, that one of these guys rises up and becomes a really good value in the 12th round or later? I don't think it's crazy.
No, it's not crazy at all. I mean, even if you go back to the Bucs when Jameis was throwing all these touchdowns, all these interceptions, like when Mike Evans, Chris Godwin went down, Brashad Perryman had like 3 games of 20+ points that season from what I remember. Even in, I believe it was an early game in the morning, he just balled out. I mean, Jameis is a guy that one of these guys every single week is going to drop 25+ points because Jameis just does not care where he throws the ball. He's going to look deep downfield constantly, and whoever's open, even if they're not open, frankly, Jameis is going to throw the ball their way. So this offense has a lot of potential for breakout at the wide receiver position, and Jameis dumping the ball off to Alvin Kamara, especially without Michael Thomas, the numbers of Alvin Kamara receptions are some banana land stuff. If you read them, it's like 7, 8, 9, 11, 11 without Michael Thomas. So it's like, if you're getting a running back that could have 11 targets a game in the first round, that's just crazy. But on the other end of the stick, if Taysom Hill ends up starting, there's no way I'm drafting Alvin Kamara 3rd overall or something, because I'd be very nervous about the fact that he just doesn't dump the ball off at all for some reason.
Do you think that Winston will be starting? I do.
Yeah, I'm 100% sure. I've declared that multiple times. 100% sure Jameis will start. But I do think Taysom Hill will play because for some reason Sean Payton has some type of like affection for Taysom Hill.
He does. Will it be enough to really screw this offense up? No, I don't think it'll be enough. I hope he's not used frequently in the red zone or goal line situations, but that is yet to be seen. What I do know is if I'm in PPR leagues and you guys do your thing, right? Whatever, listen, this is a show where we're just shooting the shit, giving our opinions. Everyone's going to have their own opinions. And sometimes, you know what, we plant our flag in a certain place and refuse to take it out. And we say, you know what, no, I'm not doing that. No matter what no matter how good that opinion and information and maybe that subtle command is, you say, nah, I'm still not doing it. If I'm in PPR leagues, I'm drafting Alvin Kamara over Derrick Henry all day long. And now, see this. Would you go Henry over Kamara at 3 in PPR?
If Winston's the guy, I'm 100% drafting Kamara every single time over Derrick Henry, because Derrick Henry, he's going to rush for like 2,100 yards, and that's cool and all, but he has 0 receiving upside. The guy has stone hands. He can't catch the ball. Yeah,
Derrick Henry did rush for 2,000 yards last year, and Kamara was still the number 1. And granted, 21 touchdowns, is that sustainable? I'm likely to say no. Okay. But Derrick Henry still had 17 touchdowns. And, you know, where you and I differ a little bit is I highly doubt we get another 2,000-yard rushing season from Derrick Henry. I have a tough time believing he gets almost 400 carries again. And I think they brought in Julio Jones for a very specific reason. I still think he's going to be incredible, get a ton of goal line work and all of that good stuff. But Alvin Kamara, just that pass catching upside in PPR formats, especially with Michael Thomas out, the floor, the crazy thing is the floor on Alvin Kamara has to be higher than Derrick Henry, right? Like if Winston is in there, because Kamara could have only 30 receiving yards in a game, but it could come on 6 receptions. You know, he's going to give you a touchdown each game in receptions alone. And while Derrick Henry is definitely amazing, he is scoring dependent for sure. I think you're looking at Alvin Kamara as somebody that each week a bad game is going to be like 15 DraftKings or draft 15 fantasy points.
Yeah, if in the chat, if you're sitting there and you're thinking that we hate Derrick Henry, that's not what we're saying. But what we're trying
I have him in almost all of my dynasty leagues. I love Derrick Henry for sure.
Yeah, we both like Derrick Henry. It's just that Alvin Kamara's ceiling is the running back one, which to me, unless McCaffrey gets hurt, unless Cook gets hurt, unless a couple of guys get hurt, then there's no way to me that Derrick Henry can be that with the limited receiving upside. Now, he's still good. He's still a top 5 pick in fantasy. You're not going to be mad leaving your draft with Derrick Henry. But to me, if Winston is the guy the whole season, then Alvin Kamara really could be the number one guy. He's one of 3 running backs, in my opinion, that can rush for 1,000 yards and also get 1,000 receiving yards.
He hasn't done it yet, but I feel like it has to happen, right? At some point, it's got maybe not. It's really tough to do, but if he goes for 900 and 800 and he has 15 total touchdowns, you're going to want Alvin Kamara everywhere. And he's capable of doing that. What did he have? He had 1,700 yards from scrimmage last year, just shy of that, and 21 touchdowns. I mean, it's ridiculous. And he was the RB. I think he was still the RB2 in standard leagues too, Nick. I don't know if we've talked about that, but in standard leagues, Kamara was the number 2. He was behind Derrick Henry, of course, but even in standard, a guy that didn't rush for 1,000 yards was the RB2. Gotta like it. Yeah,
and he scored 5 touchdowns against the Vikings on Christmas. Derrick Henry's never going to score 5 touchdowns in a game, in my opinion.
5 or 6.
Maybe it was 6. It was on Christmas. It was a Christmas miracle.
Oh, I remember. I came 0.10 shy of solo winning the or not solo. It would have been I would have tied with 3 people the showdown on DraftKings, which was like 300K to first. And I came 0.10 shy of that on a Jared Cook garbage time catch as they were like trying to ice the game or something. So I remember that because I had Alvin Kamara. Most of us did. He had 6 rushing touchdowns in that game, 155 rushing yards on 22 attempts. That's so crazy.
Yeah. And that, like, the Vikings defense isn't that bad. That's just bananas, those numbers.
Overcome says, and we'll close it out after this with some injuries, but I will answer this question because we haven't really talked about him in the shows we've done together. How do you feel about Ekeler in full PPR? I love him, but I'll defer to you, Nick. Where do you stand on Ekeler in full PPR?
Okay, so last season, I was all aboard the Austin Ekeler train. I was looking at the splits with Melvin Gordon in versus Melvin Gordon not there in 2019, and it all pointed to a lot of success for Ekeler. And then game 1, he is terrible. If you remember this with Tyrod Taylor does not know how to dump the ball off at all, and he was terrible. And then Tyrod, obviously, the doctor did him dirty, and he's out. Then Justin Herbert goes in, and then Eckler's really good. So I think this year, Ekeler does have top 5 potential. He's the other running back besides McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara that I could see rushing for 1,000 yards and getting 1,000 receiving yards. Now, he's not going to be dominant in the rushing game, but where you get your value from Austin Ekeler is in the receiving game, and he could easily be a top 10 running back, maybe even top 5 if all the things point in his direction.
I agree. And I know there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense, but Austin Ekeler is still the number 1 rush, like actual running back rusher on that team. I'm not saying he's an incredible, downhill rusher, north, south, but he's going to do enough. And as a pass catcher, he's going to be very good. I ran these numbers. I wish I could pull them up, but I can't remember. I believe he was maybe you remember, but in the weeks that he did play last year, I think Ekeler was like the RB5 or something. He was really good.
Yeah, besides that game with Tyrod Taylor, he was a top 10, top 5 running back every single week. So you could easily see a narrative where he finishes top 10. That's why he's getting drafted in the first round of a majority of leagues right now, especially in PPR, because that value that he gets from potentially 8 potential targets every single game is so high.
Yeah. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, and then he played weeks 12 through 17. I can pull this up right now. I can isolate these weeks and see where Ekeler was in terms of fantasy points. He was the RB6. Yeah.
Yeah.
In PPR. Oh, wait, no, hold on. He was the RB7 from PPR standpoint. But again, that's pretty much where you're going to be drafting him anyway. Right. And yeah. I'm cool with that for sure. So are you first round Ekeler? You feel good about first round Ekeler?
Yeah, I felt very confident in it last year, and nothing that I saw last year would tell me not to do it again. I mean, he got hurt, obviously, that sucks, but you can't predict that to happen again. So I think he should be good as a top 10 pick. Maybe even you can argue him in the range of a guy like Ezekiel Elliott. Maybe you would lean him over Zeke.
And hey, if you guys haven't checked out FFPC, they're sponsoring today's show. Home of high stakes fantasy, season-long fantasy football. You got best ball, you got pros versus Joes and dynasty leagues. Whatever contest you're looking for, they got it over there at FFPC. And yes, it is the home of high stakes fantasy football. It's been that way for a long time. But you also have entry fees starting at $35 and first place prizes up to $500K. So there's legitimately something for anyone over there at FFPC. It's myffpc.com. Actually, we can throw the link in chat, and I believe we actually have the link in the description as well. Yes, we do. Right there. Live stream sponsored by FFPC. Click on that link when you sign up. Check out some of the monster contests they've got going on over there. It's a great place to play. I've been playing over there for a long time in some of these leagues that just have insane payouts up top. You love to see the fantasy football and the best ball space really climb, where you've got $500K top prizes, $1 million top prizes. It's awesome. And it's fun to be a part of that. And it's fun to talk about it as well. So check it out. Hit that link right down there hit that link right down there. Brunson says, wow, bashing another YouTuber. You guys are turds. First of all, Nick didn't say anything. That was all me. Second of all, I'm not bashing anybody. I'm saying he has a different opinion than us. And here's why: we don't share the same opinion. So back off. But I've been called much worse than a turd in my life. So cheers, fella.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, sorry. You can go.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, some guy on my video yesterday said he unsubscribed because I'm toxic or something, which I was laughing so hard. I was like, wow.
I don't know, man. I try and be a decent person, but nobody's perfect. All right, let's cruise through these before we wrap this up. It is the injuries that we've had around the league. We already talked about Wentz and Nelson. Those are huge ones in Indianapolis. Devontae Smith with the MCL sprain. Week to week, they're saying it should be on the shorter end of that. Nothing to be concerned about. But you know what? I do get concerned when a rookie that hasn't played a single snap in the NFL is injured and is going to miss potentially half of training camp or more, or most of training camp. What do you think this does to the Eagles offense right now and to Devontae Smith's ADP, or what it should do?
I think his ADP will drop back slightly, but I think there's going to be a severe overreaction in people trying to draft Jalen Reagor, I think, honestly, because last year, a lot of people liked Reagor, obviously, who's kind of a disappointment. But I think that with this injury news that you could see him move up, and a lot of people are going to point the narrative to the fact that the guy is built like Brandon Ingram in the NBA, that he's just super skinny. He's just going to keep getting hurt, which I don't really believe. I think he should be fine, but it's obviously kind of scary, like you said, when a guy gets hurt in his rookie season in training camp, and he could miss all of training camp, I think is what I read. So I don't know.
If that's the case, I have some concerns, but then it makes me like Jalen Reagor a bit more. Even if he's not great, you're getting him super late in drafts right now. Jalen Reagor, ADP of, God, what's he at? He's got to be.
He's in the 120s, I'm pretty sure, but I think it's going to rise up a lot.
Okay, so Reagor was even further down than that 131 on Underdog. Yeah. You're right. It's probably going to come up, especially depending on where you're drafting, but he's there. I don't know. I mean, guys like Quez Watkins, there's not much to say about that. That guy's going undrafted. Travis Fulgham he was the wide receiver 1 for a month stretch last year, but then he fell off, and reports were that he didn't want to work hard and practice. I don't know. He's got a 216 ADP. Are any of these guys worth looking at as potential beneficiaries here, or is this just a wait and see game for you?
Maybe Fulgham, because like you said, last year he did have points where he was pretty good. But besides that, I mean, I understand taking Jalen Reagor where he's going now, but you see a lot of times in training camp, the average draft position just moves so quickly with any news that I think he could easily move up to be like a 10th, 11th round pick. And at that point, I'm just not going to take him. So I think besides Jalen Reagor, though, there really isn't anyone to get that excited about.
All right, next one. Where do we stand on Dak Prescott's shoulder? I know I'm not trying to overreact here, but it's his throwing arm. It's a shoulder injury. And the thing that stood out to me was he did have to get an MRI on it. Like if there was no MRI and it was just, ice it up guy and get back out there, fine. Should we be at all concerned about the fact that he just had an MRI on his shoulder? This is from a few days ago. Amari Cooper's on the PUP list dealing with that ankle. Is there any concern to you at all? Does it bump guys like CeeDee Lamb up and Michael Gallup up, given the Amari Cooper stuff? And do you worry at all about Dak Prescott, or are we just kind of all systems go for Dallas right now?
I'm pretty sure I'm in the all system go standpoint. Now, next week, Hard Knocks comes out, and then you're going to see some ADP movement that kind of happens every single year with these players. But I think Dak should be fine, but they need to play this as cautious as possible. He shouldn't play at all anymore. They should just try to fire him up week 1 and hope he's fine. I'm still fine drafting Dak, but if you're on the standpoint where in your mind it's Dak versus Aaron Rodgers, and you're thinking it's a coin flip, then I would just draft Aaron Rodgers, if I'm being honest with you, because Aaron Rodgers isn't hurt. If it's Dak versus Herbert and it's a coin flip to you, then I just take Justin Herbert, because Justin Herbert right now is not hurt. I'm all in favor of all these wide receivers in Dallas. I think if Amari Cooper was to miss serious time, CeeDee Lamb will stick as a top 10 wide receiver in ADP, and I'd be pretty fine taking him there. But I think that if Amari Cooper is healthy, people need to backtrack slightly on their CeeDee Lamb love because of where he's going, but I still think he could easily be a top 12 wide receiver. This is going to be one of the most pass-heavy teams in the NFL, and if Dak is able to stay healthy, the numbers are going to be very high for all these guys. Even Gallup's going to have like 6 games where this guy's a wide receiver 1 probably this season.
Yeah, I was looking at Gallup, and I had Gallup as a breakout player last year, and that didn't really work out too well. But you could see this season being one of those years where he absolutely is a good value. It's not like he's being overlooked either. He's definitely getting some love, but I like all of these guys. I'm with you. I have some concerns that this team never stays healthy, but those are really just, they're unfounded. There's nothing I can do about that. I'm not going to bump guys back because they haven't stayed healthy in the past, and it's all random players. So I don't know. Mr. Meowskers. 6th pick in a 10-man. Do I take Zeke or Tay? Who's Tay?
Devontae Adams, I'd assume.
Oh, must be.
I don't know who else it could be.
You're right. I wasn't even thinking Adams as a 6th pick. I'm going Zeke there. I love Devontae Adams, but in a 10-man, you can come back and get an elite. You could get a Ridley or a Hopkins in the 2nd round. I'd be okay with that. What about you?
Yeah, unless I'm drafting around the 8 spot, that's when I'm willing to draft maybe a receiver or a Travis Kelce. But before then, I'm all in on running back. I think the running backs really do fall off after the 2nd round. It starts to get a little bit more dicey with those guys, and the hit rate on those running backs obviously gets much lower. So I think drafting a running back in the 1st round is ideal, and hitching your wagon to the Cowboys offense if Dak is able to stay healthy should be pretty good, because Zeke was really good last year when Dak was healthy. It all fell apart after Dak got hurt.
Does that mean that you would draft Saquon Barkley 6th still, or 5th?
Probably, but I mean, you really have to see how risky you want to be, because if you want to be risk averse, which you could do, then I'm not drafting Saquon Barkley. I'll just draft someone else. But if I'm trying to maybe be a little bit more risky, then I'm doing that. Because if you guys remember a couple of years ago with Le'Veon Bell, when he got suspended for smoking weed, he was out like 2-3 games. And he was still the 2nd overall pick in fantasy, because you could just draft D'Angelo Williams or someone later. So say Saquon's out 2 games, not even out 2 games, just getting a smaller workload in those 2 games. You plug someone in from the 8th round, you play him, and then you combine those 2 together, you have a running back 1, because Saquon Barkley week in and week out is going to be dominant